Hello guys. My name is Salem. And in this video, I am going to summarize to you the top 3 most important learning techniques that I have gained from the Learning How to Learn course that has been taught on Coursera, the famous distance education platform, and how I'm using those techniques that I have learned from that course to be a better learner, and how does that help me in the improvement of my professional career. In the world of work today, technological advancements are changing the prospects for employment at an unprecedented speed. Things that just 5 years ago were done by humans are now done by machines and code. The individuals not prepared for that changes may be replaced by machines, or get laid off or take pay cuts. But computers can't think for themselves. That is why they can and will only do jobs that follow clear rules, in which programmers can tell them what to do. Therefore, people employed in jobs that can be programmed away will be driven out of work, or find themselves in less paying positions. On the other hand, people who know how to use technology to become more productive will hold on to their positions, and even see a rise in income. So, ask yourself, could you be replaced easily? Well, if your job is easy to learn and can be done by others, then the answer is yes, and you would feel a pressure on your wages. But if you are highly skilled or you possess unique character strengths, then there will be less competition for your position, and you would be rewarded by job security and a stable income. The above said showed us the importance of learning and acquiring new skills. And how is that the job's requirements are always changing. As every day brings new career challenges, we need to know how to learn new things and how to acquire new skills, so we could adapt to the challenges of our professional career and stand out of the competition. That was the reason why, when I found the Learning How to Learn course on Coursera, I have taken advantage of the opportunity to learn about learning strategies from academic learning experts, who are Dr. Barbara Oakley and Dr. Terence Sejnowski from the University of California, San Diego. Now let's start with the first skill of the top 3 learning skills that teaches me the art of learning how to learn. Number 1. The ping pong technique. In order to understand this technique, we need to know that we have 2 thinking modes, 2 ways of learning new information. The focused and the diffuse thinking modes. The focused mode works by looking at a problem and trying really hard to solve it. It is about actively using every inch of our mental force to understand the problem that is in front of us. It's like seeing a wall and trying to figure out how could we pass through it, or finding a way of how to cross to the other side. The diffuse mode is just letting your mind wander without a plan. This can deepen your understanding, or just trigger new creative thoughts into your mind. And when seeing the wall again, with diffuse mode, your mind might say, why don't we tie a bunch of balloons together and just pass over it? Both modes are important to maximize your understanding of the problem that you are facing, and the ping pong technique explains how to switch between focused and diffuse modes in order to increase our understanding and get creative. So, to truly optimize our learning, we need to play ping pong between the 2 modes. Focus, relax, focus, relax, focus, relax, and so on. So, focus all your attention on doing a specific task, and try to shut off any distractions, like your phone and other noise. After doing this for a while, stop to focus deliberately, and let your mind freely wander. This is when the brain connects what you just focused on with other information stored in your memory, which leads to deeper thinking, better retention, and allows for creative thoughts to happen. The best practice is to start with the most difficult problem. Once you get stuck, switch to a more simple one. While doing the easier problem, your brain will keep the difficult problem in its working memory. Without conscious thought, your brain will look for connections and try to make sense of the initial more difficult problem. Once you are done with the easy problem, go back to the difficult one, and you would find that it wasn't as difficult as you thought. One way of making sure you're taking regular breaks to help you in switching between the focused and the diffuse modes is to follow the Pomodoro technique. This is where you set a timer to 25 minutes of doing a specific task, then shut down any of the distractions that could grab your attention away from that task, and just focus entirely on it. If any other thing comes to your mind during this period, just avoid them for now, but you could write ideas to do it later. When the timer rings, take a break for 5 minutes. Get up during this time. Do not take the break at the same spot that you were working. Now you have just finished the Pomodoro cycle quarter. In order to do a full Pomodoro cycle, you have to complete 4 Pomodoro. The first 3 Pomodoro followed by 5 minutes break, and the last one followed by long break of 30 minutes. The small breaks in between the Pomodoro would relax your mind and motivate you to keep going. Number 2. Focus on process, not product. Procrastination is the avoidance of doing a task that needs to be accomplished now and trying to do it later. It refers to the practice of doing more pleasurable things in place of less pleasurable ones. It is the act of putting off something that's important or necessary in the short term, and carrying out less urgent activities instead. This can involve putting off impending tasks to a later time, sometimes leaving it to the last minute before a deadline. And a very good tactic to use when you find yourself facing procrastination in learning a new thing is to focus on the process, not the product. The product is the outcome of the process. For example, if I have a task that needs to be done, and I am focusing on the idea of that I need to finish this task. The process is the flow of time in the actions and habits related to producing the product. For example, if I need to finish the same task, but I am focusing on the idea of that I need to spend the next 25 minutes working on that task. And to prevent procrastination, you need start to avoid focusing on the product, instead, giving your attention to the actions that would help you to finish the product. This would allow you to do the unpleasant tasks that need to be done more easily. For example, the best surfers are not those who have read more about how to be the best surfers in the world and focuses on the product of being champions, but those who plays with the waves and focuses on the process of spending the time on practicing every day because they love it. In a Stanford University design experiment, a pottery teacher split the class into 2 groups. The first group focused on making as many clay pots as they wanted, the second on making one single very beautiful pot. At the end, that teacher graded the pots and announced the winner. The results were clear. All the best pots came from students that made many pots, not those that tried making one single winning piece of art. This technique will help you feel more relaxed during completing your task, and give you a sense of accomplishment once you finish it. In addition, that it would keep your interest up, and increases the motivation to continue the tasks that you have worked on but you haven't finished yet, by focusing on the next process milestone. Number 3. Chunking. If you try to remember the number 0811278882, you would find that it is hard to remember. But if you chunk the number into 3 pieces, 0811278882, you can feel that it is easier to remember now. Cutting large bits of information into smaller pieces helps us to understand it more. And if we put small pieces back together, we can see the big picture, and that helps us to remember it better. This process is called chunking. And here is how it works. According to learning expert Dr. Barbara Oakley, our short-term memory is fast but tiny. It could hold only 4 chunks of information at once. So when new inputs arrive, it has 2 ways to pick them up. First, it can overwrite and forget to make space for new information. Or, it can use mental effort to move a chunk from the working memory into the long-term memory, where it can be stored and remembered later. This is why it is almost impossible to recall 9 digits like 0811278882. There is simply not enough space. But once chunked, there is. Chunking is a very effective method to help you in understanding complex topics. Say you want to understand the trade between China and India. You can chunk the information by studying China only. Study the people, the culture, and the economy. Then summarize and put what you learned in your own simple language. After that, repeat the process for India. Then study the trade itself, the mechanics, benefits, and problems. Again, simplify the information as simple as you could. Then put the three pieces, China, India, and the trade, all back together. At the end, you might find yourself that you have just summarized several complex concepts onto only one simple page. Now you can use the comment section below to tell us which techniques that you would start to apply at first to improve your learning capacity. Would you start with the Big Bang technique, or focusing on the process rather than the product? Or you would start to practice chunking information? If you find this video useful, please like it, and feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel for future updates.